right, and we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our office hour session. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. Today, we will be talking about another topic that we have prepared for you all. It's going to be around how do we actually get started with our RudderStack open source product. So we will be talking about a number of setup best practices and also opening it up for anyone who might have any questions around setup configuration and so on. So again, if you are joining us for the very first time, the intention of the office hours is really just to provide a way for us to connect with our community, to provide any support that's needed, and also for us to for you to hear more from our team internally. We will be having folks from engineering as well as other teams on those office hours, but also a chance for you to ask any questions and share any feedback that you have while using the product. So with that, then we're going to go ahead and get started with today. And again, also, if you're joining us for the first time, the topics that we will be choosing the theme around for each one of those office hours will be based on a poll. And we will be doing a poll on a monthly basis within our RudderStack Slack community. So if there's any specific topics in mind that you feel like would be important to cover, definitely look out for those and let us know what you're interested in hearing about. So with that, then we'll go ahead and get started introducing the RudderStack team. I'll go ahead and get started myself. My name is Sarah, and I'm a developer advocate. So my role sits within the developer relations team. And my job really is to provide support, ongoing support for the community, make sure we are plan different types of events, content that helps people get started with RudderStack much easier and to make the overall developer experience a lot better. I'm super passionate about helping others solve their data problems. Currently, I'm super interested in data orchestration and data governance side of things, and of course, open source. So with that, I'll hand it over to the rest of the team. I don't know who's available. Pradeep, do you want to go ahead and provide your introduction?
Hi everyone, I'm Pradeep. I work with RudderStack in developer relations team. My focus area is open source project. Today I will be speaking about the same, but before that I would love to hear if other team members are here and if they want to introduce themselves.
Okay, Pradeep, I think maybe we can move on. Once the other folks join us, maybe we can have them introduce themselves as well. But for now, I think we'll move on by just chatting about really what we're going to be covering for today. So essentially, with each one of those office hour meetings, we'd love to cover a specific topic. We don't want to spend too much time here. We kind of want to open it up so everyone have an open conversation and make sure others can ask any questions that they have. So really the topic of discussion today is going to be around the RudderStack open source or the self-hosted offering, right? So if you're new to RudderStack, you're probably aware that there are two different products. They're the RudderStack Cloud and then RudderStack Open Source. For today, we wanted to focus a little bit more on open source, but we will be talking at the end maybe what are some of the main differences between the two products. We'll also be focusing on how to get things set up, how do we test it out, since in the context of open source, you're kind of choosing to host everything yourself, right? Rather than dealing with a managed solution, which is managed by our team with the cloud product, you're choosing to set up especially the data plane part yourself. So we'll talk about the differences between those two and how to get started the right way. So that entails really how do we set things up, and of course there are different scenarios of how we would set that up, but also how do we test and make sure that our deployment is working, that's it's fully functional. What are some of the supported sources and destinations, since there are some differences between that and the cloud product. And then if we were to self-host the control plane, which is more of the UI, the front, the front end of the app, how we would do that as well. At the end, we'll just open it up for like any questions that you have, or if you have any issues with their setup, then that's something we can discuss at that time as well. And with that, I'll hand it over to Pradeep, who's going to be leading the demo, walking us through all those different steps. So Pradeep, feel free to get started whenever you're ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to our office hours this week. And this week we are covering how to set up open source RudderStack. It won't take us too much time, and we will just cover the part where how you set up open source RudderStack using Docker, how you test it, and if you have any questions related to that, you can ask at the end of this session. And before actually starting this, I would want to share the news, which if you are coming from a Slack community, you might know already that we recently released version 1.0 for RudderStack. So this is a big event because we are promising our commitment for stability of the product and backward compatibility. What's new in this V 1.0? You will find out. I'll share the link with you, but if I just share the brief, there is a better, there are some improvements related to performance, related to the retry logic when you send events, and then there are a couple of more integrations of sources and destinations. So we will share all the details of these features, what's new here, and what can you do with V 1.0 in the link in the chat after this session. Okay. So before actually starting, I would want to first know that how many people here have are already part of Slack community and already have some idea about open source RudderStack. If you are completely new, then do let me know, because that's when I will want to cover a couple of more things.
Yeah, hi Pradeep, Mukesh here. I am completely new to RudderStack.
Got it. Okay, thanks Mukesh. Okay, cool. So in that case, I would want to first start with what is RudderStack and what can you do with RudderStack open source. So RudderStack is a tool to send your event data to various destinations, or in other words, you can also say that to collect event data from multiple sources to your warehouse or database. Now, why would you want to do that? So earlier, the approach a couple of years back, the approach was to, when you have a lot of data, the approach was to apply some sort of computations on that data, and you applied those sort of computations for different tasks that you had. For example, analytics. For example, you wanted to optimize conversions for your website, for your product, or if you wanted to drive some business insights from the data. So you would have different data in different places. You would apply a computation here and then on different database or warehouse, and then another database or warehouse. So this is not at all scalable, and it leads to many mistakes, and your data gets out of sync on those different systems. So the better approach is to have this data centralized, let's say in one of your warehouse or data lake, and then apply all those computations there. Now, how do you get this data from those different sources to this one data lake or data warehouse? That's where RudderStack comes in. So we have lots of SDKs for different platforms, different, let's say, for example, for website, we have JavaScript SDK. If you are using a React Net, you are building a mobile application, you can connect that, those event data using React Native SDK, Android SDK, or other SDKs that we have. Similarly, there are server-side SDKs as well. So you can integrate those SDKs and get event data from there. So as you can see in this image, so you collect those event data and then send it to your warehouse. And in between is RudderStack. So that's so the benefit that you get with this is RudderStack. Uh, I would like to, although there are multiple benefits of using RudderStack, I would like to point out two important things here. One is event ordering, and second one is the retry logic, or when your event, I would say, high availability. So what do I mean by that? In an ideal world, all your system will be up, but in practically, there are some of your systems down sometimes. Let's say some of your applications, wherever you host your data, that is down, or wherever you want to send this data, that destination is down. So in that case, when you are sending data from these multiple sources, these events are not getting to your destination. When it happens, how do you deal with this? That's what RudderStack already covers. So, uh, so this provides you a high availability environment. It has a cache kind of thing, you can say, where these events will be stored until your destination is up. So this is one thing. Second thing is, when you are actually sending these events when your destination was down, in that case, event ordering is important for multiple use cases. So let's say your event 1 came and then event 2 came. So you wouldn't want to send event 2 first instead of event 1. So maintaining this event ordering, event 2 only after event 1, that is something RudderStack already covers. So this is these are two key benefits that I would like to mention here to keep this talk brief. And how do you how do you do that on scale? That is specifically the part that RudderStack covers. So now I'm going to be going to act very similar to how a new user will act, and I'll share that how to set up RudderStack open source by simply just following RudderStack open source. It's fairly easy. So just bear with me for a couple of minutes, and you don't need to note down or anything. You can we will share the complete links that I'm going to share right now in the chat after this talk. So let me start sharing my screen first. Okay. So you want to set up RudderStack open source on your for your data sources, and you want to send it to a particular destination. That is the use case that we are covering. And if you go onto website, you will see that there is a cloud version and there is an open source version. So many of our users like to use RudderStack open source, or in other words, we can say self-host RudderStack on their machine, because this allows them to have a complete control over their data. And many of our users come from Segment, and they find that RudderStack is a very good open source alternative to Segment. So here you will find there are docs, and I'll go there. And this is something we already discussed, that getting events from multiple sources to your data warehouse, and RudderStack sits in between here. Now, if you want to set up a RudderStack open source, you will go to this RudderStack open source guide here. And here you would want to know two things. You will notice two things. One is the control plane. Second one is the data plane. So th this is just the only concept that you want to understand. After that, it is fairly simple to install it. And to showcase this, what is the difference between cloud control plane and data plane? I would like to show this architecture diagram here. So we said there are multiple sources and they are connected via some SDK. So this is the client SDK, which sits in at the source where you are collecting data from. Now there are two systems. One is this RudderStack data plane and another one is this RudderStack control plane. Now let me talk about control plane first. Control plane, you can say, is something that hosts configurations for your this data pipeline. Remember I said that you connect sources with destination. So here you have this source and there will be multiple sources here, and you want to send this to some destination. This configuration you can define on your own, that from which source you want to collect data from and which destination do you want to send this data to. So this is what I call configuration. And how does this source know that where are we sending this data? This is what is hosted by this control plane. And the code server, which actually does the job of routing your events from the source to the destination, is done by backend. So backend reads this configuration, that how should I route this event now, which has been arrived already on data plane on this, or you would say rudder server. So if an event has reached here, how do I route it? So are there any configuration that the developer has set for this data pipeline, for this streaming of this data from this source to destination? This is what will be given by this control plane, and then it will do all other things. So this is the difference between control plane and a data plane. Now let me show you a couple of things. So when you go to this rudder server repository, this is the data plane. This is what does this job of routing the events. And when you go to RudderStack here app.rudderstack.com, or whenever you sign up on rudderstack.com, it will redirect you to a control plane. So this is the control plane. This is where I have these configurations for my data sources and destination. I have defined that for this particular source, I want to send this data to this destination. And similarly for this source, I want to send data to these two destination, and similarly for other sources and destinations. And it has some configurations specifically defining any configuration related to destination or events here in this control plane. Something like this. So it is connected to these two data sources. You can add a new destination, you can create or use a destination that you have already added to other sources. So this is how this control plane looks like. There is an open source version of this control plane as well, which you can use. But this is how it looks like UI wise, and this will generate some configuration for that will be used here in Rudder server. So now let's move on to the second part. So now you know what is control plane and what is data plane. Now we come to the next part, how do we set these up? So for control plane setup, usually the users, what you normal users do is they will just sign up for free control plane that is given by RudderStack, and that you can do also, or if you want you can go into detail here, but for to keep this talk brief, I will just talk about data plane setup in this talk. And control plane setup is also fairly simple. You can follow the instruction. So here if you go to this data plane setup guide, you will see that there are three ways: Docker, Kubernetes, or you can simply set this this Rudder server is a Go based application. You can set it up on your machine, and whatever way you want to deploy it, you can deploy it. So for this talk, we will cover the Docker version. So on Docker version, initially it says about creating your control plane and getting some token from there. But hold on. For now, let's talk about data plane. So how do you set up data plane? So here you will see at the number step 3, you will see there is a link to a Docker file. So you will go there, and this is the file which you will use to install Rudder server via Docker. So I'm going to on my machine. So I have this cloud machine, and then this is an Ubuntu machine, and I'll just show you which machine I'm using. I'm using Ubuntu 20.04, and I have about 5 GB of space left on this one, and I have about, so you can see about 1 GB of memory and 1 GB of swap space. So this is a very normal configuration for any cloud machine. So I wanted to show you that this is something, if you just buy a small instance of EC2, this setup will work there as well. So now you have this, so let me go to this folder, and so this is the file that you would want to have on your system first of all, before you start installing all the containers that you need for data plane. And my favorite command to get this any file from the internet to my Ubuntu machine is wget. So I use that. But if you don't want to use wget, or let's say you want to simply copy paste, it's just one page file. You can just copy and paste in a file here. Okay, so I already have some setup here, but before that, let me show you how this YML file looks like. So this is how it looks like. It defines what DB container we are going to install. This is going to install Postgres database. It is going to install Rudder server, which you just saw, or Rudder server image, and Rudder transformer image. So this is just an overview. You don't even need to understand this complete file. What you need to pay attention is here, this workspace token. So this workspace token is for that control plane configuration that we were talking about. You want to mention it here so that this data server will know that where to get configuration for this data pipeline that you are setting up. Now, how do you get this RudderStack token? So we will go there, and only then we will start installing via Docker after updating this configuration. So you will just set up your control plane, which is, if you sign up on free cloud, it is as easy as just signing up, log in with your email password, and that's it. You will have it here. Or if you set up using open source, then also you will come to this screen, and then you go to this settings page. If I'm going fast, you can stop me and ask me any question. And after settings, you go to company. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt here. We do have a question from Jairam. I thought maybe we could pause for a few
Okay.
seconds and see if we can answer
Sure.
that. But it
Sure.
says the open source control plane is not up to date and cannot be used, right? Um,
No, it is up to date. It can be used.
Mhm.
So if you are facing any issues, then you can post in Slack channel in a support channel, and we'll be happy to answer that. I had set up both control plane, data plane, and it works fine. But if you are facing any issue that we haven't discovered yet, for let's say any particular machine that you're using,
Mhm.
then that will be a really good contribution as well in figuring out, discovering this issue, and we will fix that as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'll also add on that, Jaira, is it is
Mhm.
supported. However, we do definitely recommend, and we actually mentioned that in our docs, but we do recommend using the RudderStack hosted control plane because for some of the features, like doing the testing the live events, those are not available in the control plane light, and I think also transformations are not available within that. So if you absolutely have to, I guess that there is you can just clone the repo, then use the control plane light feature, but we recommend using the RudderStack hosted one for open source.
Right.
I
And
have one additional question to it. Pradeep, when you
yes.
said that uh, when we have a total control on RudderStack open source, we host it locally, we have the control,
Mm.
complete control of the data. And why, like, where is the cloud setup lagging? Is the cloud setup keeping some of our data somewhere?
No, cloud setup uh, uh, does not have any of your data. This cloud, I'm sorry. Okay, you are talking about cloud setup. Okay, so because cloud setup is set up on RudderStack cloud instances, so there is certain data that needs to be there in order to fulfill the service. So what I mean by that, when you're sending data from source to destination, then this data is sent to this, and if it has been sent to your destination, that data is not there on this data plane at all. But where do we need to keep some of the data in transit in data plane? That is when this you sent this event from source to data plane, but for now, let's say your destination is down or something is, or let's say you have too many events and they are queued right now to not bombard your destination at once. For those cases only, this some of that data, those event data, is queued here on data plane. So that is the data that in transit that is there on data plane. When you do this on your when you host this data plane as well, this is how this whole data will be kept. It won't keep the copy of data. It will just keep the data that is in queue. And once that data from the queue is out and it has been sent to destination, there is no data left on your data plane.
Okay,
So,
and what do you say about we use RudderStack open source hosted control plane and locally host our data plane? In that case, will the somehow the data will be stored with RudderStack?
sorry, you're saying
If
which control plane?
Yeah, I mean to say that what if we use RudderStack control plane, hosted control plane,
No,
open
no,
source?
we. Okay, so you're saying open source data plane and hosted control plane, right?
Yeah.
Which is generally the option we suggest. No, we don't have we don't store your data in that, even in that case. So the
Okay.
events that come, that they are passed directly to your data plane.
Hmm.
We don't get those events. The advantage is we make a connection from our RudderStack control plane to your data plane and are able to show you just the live events. We don't show you all the events. We can show you the live events, and the other advantages you can have, like Sarah mentioned, transformations you can have, and like other features. So that support is there, like live events, transformations. That help is there. Like also, like for us also, like debugging the control plane is a big, like an issue because we don't have any access as to what you're working on.
Right. Yep.
Finally, yeah. So you said, right, the control plane is not working, or so it's I won't say it's not working. It's not as frequently updated as our other features, like our other repositories. We don't update the hosted control, the self-hosted control plane as often. It once in a few months only it gets updated. So that is there.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so that was what we discovered when we hosted it initially and used our own control plane, right? It wasn't generating the required config for, let's say, a warehouse, the intermediary staging service, the MinIO config and all wasn't being generated by the config file. So that's
Okay.
why a lot of people suggested that we move to
Right.
the hosts, the hosted version. But I
Yeah.
was
So
just curious because
right,
when
the
you
latest,
started,
yeah, the latest
go ahead.
destinations
Sorry.
also don't get updated. Sorry, that's the reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So
Okay.
If
Okay.
you
So we
guys
will
need any
cover.
help,
Mhm.
if you guys need any help on that side, right, I would love to contribute. I just if you can guys can give me somewhere to start with, I can contribute because I've been using this basically my company has been using this software for like 2-3 months, so I do have like a vague understanding of how everything's put together. But with regards to the control plane, if you guys need any help, do let me know.
sure, I think I
Absolutely.
can reach out to you if, about that.
That'd be
Absolutely.
great.
Thank
Jairam.
you. Thank you, Jairam, for
Yeah.
sharing this. There is a channel we have in Slack contributing to RudderStack. So
Oh,
that is
okay.
the best place to discuss this, and any help we
Okay.
can do to get you to understand more about RudderStack so that you can start contributing. We will share that here. So we will cover all those issues at the end of this talk, and we will also cover probably some people have questions about open source versus cloud. We'll cover that as well. To briefly, so someone asked about this control plane data versus this hosted versus this cloud control plane. So so just to understand what data, why you are asking, I understand that. So one is this control plane. As I said, this is just the configuration. It doesn't deal with the data at all. What deals with data is the data server, this rudder server we talked about, this data plane. So data plane fetches this configuration only, and then this gives it information that this is how I want to route this event. So there was no touch point with the control plane. Control plane didn't have a touch point with the data. So that's how you can imagine that data plane is where your data is going, and control plane is where you are kind of configuring what to do with RudderStack event stream. Okay, cool. So let's move on. There is only a couple of things in setup remaining. We already downloaded this file, this Rudder Docker Compose file. So we were here that we wanted to update this workspace token. I hope my screen is visible. So this was about the control plane configuration that we want to give to this data plane. Sorry. So you go to your control plane, go to the setting, and here you will see that there is this company tab, and here you will see workspace token. You copy this token, you paste it here, and uh, then you can go ahead and install this via Docker Compose. So now I have already updated my workspace token in this file, Rudder Docker YML. So now how do you install with Docker Compose? First thing is you need to have Docker. So if you don't have Docker on your system, you can simply go to Docker engine set install, and you install from there. So this is the part. You will find all the guide here how to do this, how to install a Docker engine on your system. So I'm using Ubuntu. So I'll go to Ubuntu setup directly here. and it is fairly simple, simply running some apt get update command. One thing I want to share here, because some people sometimes miss this Docker Compose plugin. So make sure that you install Docker Compose, uh, and that's what you will need here to install this Rudder Docker YML file. So now coming back to the docs, now we have updated the workspace token, and the last step is simply running this command docker compose and minus. Okay, so let me just run this here. Docker compose with -f, you will specify the file which has this Docker configuration, and so this is the file which we have, and then you will just run up, and you will put -d to run it in detached mode. Or if you just want to test it whether it will run or not, you can just remove the -d flag. But usually you would want to run it in detached mode so that you can maybe go to, let's say, other terminal, and then do something there, or maybe here only you run other commands, for example testing whether this setup is working fine or not. So that's it. You run this, it will do a couple of things here, like this running container and all these things, and eventually it will show you that your system is set up. So now how do you see that which containers images are installed in your system? So you will run docker ps-a. So these are you, if it worked well, you will see that these four container are running. One is the rudder server, the data plane itself, and the rudder transformer if you want to transform some events. Postgres, which is the data that you where you host the data, this queue and everything, as we mentioned earlier. And then statsd exporter, which is for monitoring purposes. So this is, now your setup is complete. That's it. There is nothing else. Now all you need is, so in essential actually all of this talk I gave was to run this command. That's it. And but now you get the context what is going on behind the scenes. And second, now what you would want to do is to test if this server that you have run, this data plane server, is it working well or not. So for that, this already has an endpoint which I want to showcase it via docs, because that's what you will use. So okay, I'm not data plane setup, and yes, like this one. Okay, so here when you go to data plane setup, in FAQ you will find answers to most of your question, and one of the question is how do you test if data plane is live or not. So for that you will do this curl, and then your data plane link. So right now, as you can see, it is hosted on 8080 port. So I'm going to call this from this machine itself. So 8080, and here you check an endpoint called health. It will show you if your data plane is working correctly as expected or not. So server is up, DB is up, everything looks fine here. So it has multiple parameters that you can check upon, and everything in this one, it looks great. There is no issue with this. So that is the first check you will do after running this docker command. Okay, and now you would want to test with real test events. I mean, with events, you would want to fake some of the events and see if it is working well or not. And for that, there is already a script which comes with this Redis server repository, or if you installed via Docker, then inside the Docker itself. So you go here, sending test events, and here I will go to Docker setup. So this is where it is, and you will see this command, and you use this command to run this. So I guess I have already run this command, so I will just go to here. Okay, so this is the command that you will copy from your from this doc. So you don't need to remember this. It is there. Now there are two things which it needs. One is the write key of your source, and then second is your link to your data plane. So link to our data plane when we are accessing on the same machine, it is localhost 8080, and you call this endpoint v1 batch. So it is already there in this script on docs. So you would need one is this write key, and second one is this container ID where this system, this data plane is running. For me here this is the container ID, so I copy pasted this, and I will get this source key from my this control plane. So let me just copy any source, and here you will see that this is the write key. So any source that you set up, you will see that it has a write key which enables you, which kind of identifies that which data source you are sending this event from. So now we identify that write key. So now it will generate an event and it will be sent to this destination, sorry, this data plane. I hope my terminal is visible to you. Okay, so I just do this, enter, and okay, now you can see it seems kind of missing here, but it says okay. So if you, even if you run this again, it will say okay. So this means your this works well. So now you have completed this testing. Your data plane is set up correctly, and the last part I would want to showcase. I created this page where you can test your when you this is kind of a real world test that you can do of your data plane. Now so I will share this link with you. How you do this, you update some of the details here, like your data plane URL. So right now I was using this localhost, but when you want to use in real world, you would want to have some domain and host it on SSL, on SSL. You should on HTTPS. So you will have some let's say HTTPS your data plane dot your domain.com, something like this. So you put that here, your data plane URL here, and once you do that, you also input your write key for the JavaScript source, and then the easiest way to test in real world environment is setting up a webhook destination for your pipeline. And how you do this? So you simply go to destination, and then you create new destination. You you choose webhook there. You let me do this right now. You choose webhook, and you will say test webhook. Okay, I'll say 3. And which source you want to connect. So I want to connect this JavaScript source. I want to collect event from my website, and you input some webhook URL here. So if you want to just quickly test, you can go to websites such as Request Catcher is one of those websites, and you can Google for webhook website, similar webhook websites, and you just specify your and domain for the webhook. So I'm just going to write ps3.request.catcher.com. So this is my now webhook endpoint. So this is the destination. So and you input it here, something like this, and that's it. Your source, your JavaScript source is now connected with your webhook. Now you go to this demo I have created. So you go here and you paste this webhook URL that you just created here, ps3.request.catcher, and you enter it here and update configuration. That's it. And after that, when you so now what is happening here, I have, so this is what you will do. I have already done that here, which is to include this SDK snippet code in this page, and every time you refresh this page, it will send an event to the destination. And destination here was this webhook. So now you will open this your web destination, your webhook, where you can see that whether your events are coming or not, and then you refresh this page. And if your everything was correct, your data plane was set up correctly, your sources, you pick the right key from the sources, your control plane is set up and is connected with your webhook destination, all of this is correct, then if you refresh this page, you should see this event in your destination here. As you can see, there is an event. So this post request was made from here, and it is every time you refresh this page, you will see that new event is reaching here. So there are two events now, and that's it. It's complete. Now it works. Now you can go ahead and try out other destination. You can go ahead and add more destinations. You will find in your control plane. You go to source and you click on new source, and you will find that there are multiple event streams that you can add here. Although when you are using this hosted, this cloud control plane, you will see some extra sources, extra destination, which are not supported in cloud. But for the most of the use cases, you will see those sources and destination. I have already put what sources and destinations are supported. If you go to find that, if you go to Rudder server and you go to discussion space, you will see that open source RudderStack features. So what features are available in open source RudderStack? You will see it here. What destinations are supported? You will see that here. What sources are supported? You will see that here. So as you can see that most
Pradeep,
of,
Pradeep, I
yeah.
have. Is this referring to the new release, right? Are we gonna take a few minutes to talk about that?
Right, absolutely. So, so this is by this new release, latest release that we have, V 1.0.2. This is by at this stage, these are the features and these are the sources and destinations supported here. So I would like to quickly wrap up and then now share that we recently launched this V 1.0, and this wouldn't have been possible if there were not these 170 plus contributors who have contributed over last 3 years. And I have tried to recognize all of them in this post and have mentioned everyone here. And if you are an existing user of RudderStack and you want to upgrade to V1.0, you don't need to worry about the compatibility. It is perfectly backward compatible, and you wouldn't face any issue. Uh, I just want to highlight this point that some people might think that because we are going from V0.x to V1, probably there might be some breaking changes. No, there are no breaking changes. As per SAMWare verification, SAMWare specification, that when we commit to this stability and backward compatibility, we upgrade this version. So this was the reason to upgrade this. If you want to have more new features, new this performance upgrades, and this better retry logic, better identification of anonymous users in your RudderStack setup. These are a couple of the things. If you want to have, then you can upgrade to V1, and there won't be any issue. So that's all. Open to questions. I will stop screen sharing now.
Um, that was great. Thank you so much, Pradeep. Really great demo. You simplified explaining how to spin up the RudderStack open source. Are there any questions on anything that was covered so far from anyone? I know there were a couple while Pradeep was doing the demo, but just making sure that there isn't anything else.
Yeah, I had a general question. So in the Docker Compose file, you have another container for min.io, right? Which is essentially something you have a staging server like S3 or something to temporarily store your objects before writing to the warehouse. Correct? Hello, am I
I'm
audible?
not following
You are.
actually.
Can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah. So in the Docker Compose file that you had,
Hmm.
you had another container specifically for min.io,
Hmm.
right? And can you just elaborate a bit more on that? And do we need that separate container for other services? Where exactly does this particular bit come into play? Because it's not explained in that diagram, right? So I just wanted to, out of curiosity, know what role does that play.
I think you're looking at the commented code.
Yeah,
It
exactly. The commented code.
this
Yeah.
yeah, this is commented. It is not included there. Okay, so why it was added and why it was commented, I wouldn't have any idea about this. But is there anyone else who has idea about this?
No, I think it was added for some kind of backward compatibility also, Jera. I
I
will have
see.
to go
Okay.
back and check. So
Okay. Okay.
some
Cool. I was just
some
curious.
some use case to like to. That's why I'll have to go back and check. I have not. But there is another question on tracking plans.
Hmm.
Uh, is there any concept? There is. Sorry, Greg has asked about tracking plans.
Is there any concept of tracking plans or event validation for RudderStack open source? Yeah, Greg, that's a good question. Tracking plans are not available as a feature for open source. I'm actually just going to be talking about some of the feature comparisons kind of between the two. In terms of like event validation for open source, that's something I feel like would have to be built into the product. It wouldn't support it like out of the box. Again, yeah, like those additional features like tracking plans, data governance, APIs that kind of indicate if there are any deviation from like an original schema or like who actually do the validations. Those would be mostly on in the cloud open source, sorry, in the cloud version of RudderStack. So yeah, it would not for open source, it would not be supported. But great question. Another question is, will cloud extract and reverse ETL come to OSS, or do you guys want to keep the same feature for the cloud version? So they might. I don't know if we have. I guess we could go back.
No, I don't think it's currently not supported, right? So
It's
I
not
don't
supported.
think the team is
We
looking
don't.
at
Yeah,
making that open source.
yeah, exactly. Currently, they are. Those two are kind of more on the cloud side for RudderStack. So would have to be either the free tier or some of the other tiers as well. So with that, then I just wanted to share some of the notable differences between the two. Again, one thing that's common for RudderStack, whether you're using open source or the cloud, is it's warehouse first and it does not store any of the events, meaning none of the events that pass through are being stored anywhere. They're merely go. They're basically persisted for just a few seconds, just until the events land in the destination, just to make sure in case any retries need to be occurred, that can happen. But other than that, RudderStack does not store any of the data. Now, in the case of RudderStack open source, as you've seen through the demo, you have the option of just basically taking that data processing component of RudderStack and hosting it yourself. And usually that's something some industries who prefer to have control ownership of their infrastructure would rather do. Now, however, it's important to note that when it comes to the differences between the two, there are some things that we need to be aware of. The RudderStack open source product now only supports event streams. We do not have plans currently to add any of the other features. So you'll see here that in terms of the comparison, if we were to set up an event stream, meaning let's say we want to get like a JavaScript SDK on our site, stream all the events into some of the supported destinations like Google Analytics as an example, Cloud Data Warehouse destinations, that's fully supported. We can also use the transformations, the live events viewer within the RudderStack hosted control plane in order to validate, see that we are getting those the events as they are being sent. So now that's supported. However, some of those other capabilities like reverse ETL, cloud extract, those are not currently available with RudderStack open source. However, if you do want to use the product free, you can sign up for the free tier and actually like test out and use some of those features as well. In terms of the setup, you've also seen there are some differences. In terms of cloud, really all you need to do is sign up for a free account, and then you can start. You'll get a managed version of that control plane that we just set up. As we've seen in open source, in that case, we want to host everything ourselves. We can either choose to host it in our managed Kubernetes or locally or on a Docker setup, similar to what Pradeep has shown us. And then just some more feature comparisons, right? The live events viewer is something that's still available. Transformations are still available in open source, but some of those other features, like getting some metrics, looking at the warehouse uploads, those are now only available in cloud as well. So going to be dropping this link in the chat just in case not everyone has it, but feel free to take a look at all those feature comparisons. Again, if there are any questions beyond this, like this definitely doesn't have to stop here. If there are any questions on this, you can always reach out to us on the support in our support channel in our Slack community, channel. Now, just before we wrap up, wanted to talk about some resources that you can take a look at after this is done. Our tech blog has a number of really great resources. Some of our really popular ones are how we as RudderStack use RudderStack. So you can look at our complete data stack for some best practices on how to use the different components of ETL, reverse ETL, and event streams, and how we actually do that internally. And then we've actually announced last week something we're super excited about, that we are now HIPAA compliant. So you can actually go and read more about that within our tech blog as well. And I'll be sure to provide those links towards the end. And then all the documentation around how to get started on setting up the RudderStack open source is also available. So I'll also add this link within the slides when I share them later. But also some other resources that I wanted to bring the attention to is we now have a number of video series. So if you want to go ahead and get started with RudderStack open source and you want like an end-to-end of how it's done, there's a series of videos that we've created for that. So I'll link those over here as well. And then this is for getting started with RudderStack, the cloud free tier. Then there's also some talk about how we basically instrument our events, and also an overview of the overall RudderStack product. And lastly, we have some short snackable videos that you can actually look into. Those talk about specific features like transformations, event streams, how to monitor things using Grafana dashboards. Really great resource created by our internal customer success team. So definitely want to check it out if you need to as well. Now, if you haven't already, join our Slack community as well. This is where we'll post any polls where you can actually contribute and let us know what topics you're interested in hearing more about. Once this is done, we're actually going to be taking all the resources that we just shared and put them in the community office hours channel. So make sure to check that out if you want a recap of everything covered. And lastly, you can also sign up for those as well with the link that I'll be sharing. So with that, then, thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Pradeep, for the really awesome demo. And we hope to see you in the next office hour session.
Thanks. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Pradeep. Thanks, folks, for joining.
Thanks for joining. We will be in touch on Slack. Bye.